Dr. Priya Basu talking to us about winter bees, understanding winter bees for improving colony health. Priya is an assistant professor in pollinator health and apiculture at Washington State University, and she also holds a courtesy faculty position at Oregon State University. She actually spoke to us back in June of 2024 about honeybee nutrition. She's the principal author of the Honeybee Health Coalition's Honeybee Nutrition Guide, and the talk that she did in June 2024 was on that guide and honeybee nutrition and some of the research that she was doing at Mississippi State University, where she was at the time. Now she's at Washington State and Oregon State University. So we've asked her to come back and talk about something that is on all of our minds right now, at least my mind right now, winter bees. So with that, I will I will hand it off to you, Priya. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Yasmin, for the kind introductions. And it's great to be back in about a year and a half. Uh, so, before I dig into winter bees, I really wanted to give you a little backstory about just not only the research we do in the lab, but why nutrition and eventually winter bees are so important for overall colony health. I hope your bees are doing better and have been doing better compared to the overwintering losses that we've seen this past year. When we talk about it, we really do think, at least I absolutely think, that these are multiple stressors that are impacting bee species. It could be pests, parasites, pathogens, poor nutrition, pesticides, the environment, whatnot. In reality, all of these stressors are not only acting alone, but they are also interacting with each other to cause further stress. Even though my talk today is going to focus a lot on poor nutrition, but I'm really hoping that you sort of look at this holistic picture and not just focus on any one stressor, but truly think about all of these components as sort of like a matrix in the landscape that bees are exposed to. And that is precisely what we do in our lab as well. We are, of course, known for bee nutrition because we are not only mapping the nutritional landscape for bees, we are also looking at the nutritional health in colonies. But we also do a lot of work with pesticide toxicity. We look at the impacts of heat and drought stress on bees, as well as wildfires. And in addition to that, as I mentioned before, we are extremely focused on understanding the impacts of these multiple stressors. And we do that in a lot of different ways. So we look at individual bees. We also look at the overall colony health. We look at colony behavior, performance, bee gut microbiome, bee behavior, bee health, physiology. So we really look at it from the individual all the way to the colony level. But what is really important is that we focus on the interactions between all of these stressors. So why am I obviously putting more importance to bee nutrition? This is because nutrition, just as important it is for us as humans, it is equally important for all life, including bees. Especially when we talk about honeybees, honeybee nutrition is quite complex because you're looking at the colony needs, the overall colony needs. You're looking at the individual honeybee need. And all of that will really depend on what caste it is, what age it is, what life cycle stage it is. So essentially, when you're bringing all of those individual components together, that truly makes honeybee nutrition extremely complex. We also say that nutrition is the first line of defense for honeybees. A lot of studies from our lab, from other labs have shown that adequate nutrition certainly helps improve bee health. Bees are exactly what they eat. The better fed they are, they have better immunity, they can fight off other stressors better, they have improved longevity. So having access to adequate nutrition across the different life cycle stages, the ages, as well as across the year is extremely important. And it's even more critical for honeybees because we know that in the colony, nutrition determines the castes. So a female larva, if it's fed royal jelly throughout the larval period, it becomes the queen. If that same female larva is switched over to just the regular worker jelly, she is going to now become the sterile worker. Even between these castes, that diet has to be optimal to make sure we have a healthy queen, we have healthy drones, and we have healthy workers. However, nutritional stress, Even though it is an important factor in colony losses, it is still not thoroughly investigated. Only over the last maybe decade or 2 decades, if you really stretch it out, we're starting to think about everything that really goes into what an optimal nutritional diet might be for bees. When I talk about an optimal nutritional diet, whether artificial or natural, bees need nutrients. And when we are looking at the landscape, all of the macro and micronutrients that bees need will come from pollen and nectar. Macronutrients, as the name suggests, are of course critical for bees and they're required in larger quantities. Micronutrients, on the other hand, are just as important, even though they're required in smaller amounts. Examples of macronutrients include carbohydrates, proteins, and major lipids, whereas examples of micronutrients include phytochemicals, vitamins, minerals, and phytosterols. During a foraging trip, foragers will commit to any one of these resources and they are going to forage the landscape for it. So pollen is obviously quite often collected. Pollen provides important proteins, lipids, vitamins, minerals, phytosterols. Nectar is equally important. It's not only providing their primary energy source, which is obviously carbohydrates, nectar also provides trace amino acids and other micronutrients such as phytochemicals and minerals. And let's not forget water. Foragers prefer compound-rich water, especially water that is rich in minerals, during pollen scarcity in the landscape. Water also helps them stay cool, hydrated, and will help honeybees reliquefy crystallized honey. I often say that the three most critical aspects of a bee's forage landscape are that landscape must be diverse, it should have staggered bloom, and of course, an abundance of floral resources. Diverse meaning diversity in flowers, diversity in the macro and the micronutrients. Abundant meaning, of course, an abundance of forage. And staggered means something or the other is constantly blooming in the landscape. So essentially, at least from the last frost of the year to the first frost of the year. So this will really provide a continuous floral support for bees. There are many different ways that bees can be nutritionally challenged. There could be lack of pollen quantity or quality or even pollen diversity. The same is true for nectar. There could be a lack of nectar abundance, diversity, or quality, essentially meaning a lack of all of the macro and micronutrients that bees need. When it comes to a successful overwintering scenario for honeybee colonies from the nutritional perspective, survival of the colony, enough food reserves within the colony, as well as healthy diatoneous bees or winter bees are extremely important. And that's what I'm going to focus on towards the second half of this presentation. So why are we really interested in primarily focusing our direction towards bee nutrition today? So let's look at a few statistics and a few examples. According to NASS, which is the National Agricultural Statistics Service of the United States Department of Ag, US had about 2.71 million colonies according to the 2023 NASS estimates. And of course, we know that the beekeeping industry generates at least $20 billion in revenue for the United States alone. When beekeepers were asked what did they think that their colonies, the colony losses could be attributed to, they named many different stressors. So the way you're going to look at this graph right here is if you can follow my laser pointer, this first block right here are varroa mites. The second block, other pests and parasites. The third block, diseases. The fourth block, pesticides. And the fifth block, largely grouped as others unknown. Each color will give you a time point. So black is for January through March 23. Red is for April through June 23. Yellow is for July through September 23, green is for October through December 23, and then blue is for January through March 24. So, of course, as always, varroa mites have been considered the main reason why beekeepers might have lost honeybee colonies. But if you really ask me, I truly believe that poor nutrition should not only be within this others unknown category, it is also the reason for every other thing that you see out here. Beekeepers often consider nutritional management just as a part of beekeeping. But what we often don't realize is that if we don't feed that colony is either going to abandon or that colony is going to die because it's going to starve. And health, immunity of the colony, the ability to fight off every one of these stressors that you see is really reliant, truly reliant on healthy bees, which means they need to have access to a healthy diet. Same, if you look at that NAS statistics, they also publish the annual honey report. What I'm showing you right now is their report from 23. So in 2021 and 2022, beekeepers in the United States spent anywhere between $42 to $45 million in providing supplemental feeding to their colonies. So this table here shows you beekeeper income and beekeeper expenditure for the US. If my math is correct and you're looking at all of these zeros, that is a staggering amount of money that beekeepers have spent in the US. And supplemental feeding includes syrup, sugar water, honey, pollen patties, and any and all other types of feed. If you're looking at varroa mite control or hives and woodenware, it is about a third or less than what the beekeepers have spent in providing supplemental feed to their colonies. Similarly, if you're looking at the NAS statistics reports from 2025, for 2023 and 2024, beekeepers are spending between $45 and $47 million in providing annual feeding. Once more, varroa mite treatment and hives and woodenware are only about a third or less of that amount. This really tells us that bees need access to better forage. Bees also need access to better supplemental diets that would be effective and also not only effective in terms of the colony output, but also effective in terms of costs. This really tells us that how critical nutrition is, how much resources we are spending for nutrition as beekeepers, but how we truly don't sort of appreciate the importance of nutrition, which is why it's really important that when we are thinking about colony health overall, considering their nutritional health should be at the very top of our list of priority. Even though diverse forage is extremely important because natural pollen has a lot of macro and micronutrients, which truly is not present in a lot of paddies that are available out there in the market so far. Similarly, nectar has a lot of macro and micronutrients that sugar syrup alone will not be able to replace. But no matter how important diverse forage is, so is providing supplemental feeding. The colonies should not be starving when they are going to need it the most. And let's not forget water. Water is extremely important for bees. So this video that you're looking at is a water fountain that I used to run at my Mississippi State Research Apiary. I got it from eBay, which is why parts are very hard to come by because I have no idea what that brand is. But it's a very functional water fountain. It looks super cute because it looks like a skep. But when you're looking at it, it's got steps cut on the sides. So there are landing surfaces for bees. The flow of water is gentle, so bees are not going to drown. I threw in rocks and pebbles at the bottom, also providing additional landing surfaces. The water is constantly recycled, so I don't have to worry about mosquitoes. And on top of that, I don't clean it throughout the year. So I run it from the last frost to the first frost. So moss, lichens, whatever wants to grow on it, it's going to grow, thereby providing a source of minerals in that water for bees. You don't even have to find something like that. It could be a bucket, it could be a tub. Throw in some rocks, throw in some hardware cloth, let that water completely evaporate before you refill it in, so that you don't have to worry about mosquitoes if you have that in your region. But essentially, it's just providing a source of water for the bees. And I did talk about the very basics of bee nutrition as well as the supplemental feeding guide when I spoke to you last year. So I'm not going to go into the details, but just a quick reminder that we do have a one place all for understanding all about the basics of bee nutrition and providing supplemental feeding. This is the first version of the guide that we published in 24. I am going to work on revising this around next winter so that we have a newer version updated every 2 years. So hopefully this way, as and when we have more research upcoming about supplemental feeding, we can continue to add to this feeding guide. So the second part of my talk that I wanted to focus on before I moved into winter bees, which would be the last third segment of my presentation today, I really wanted to touch upon how to best provide supplemental feeding for colonies. Now, these are probably the most commonly used best management practices. Please keep in mind the timeline, the ways of providing supplemental feeding, and the different products that you use are obviously going to be extremely variable based on where you're located, what your microclimates are, what your colony needs are, your beekeeping needs are, and what your common practices are. But essentially, when you're thinking about providing supplemental feed to the colonies, let's start with spring first. So in spring, our colony is obviously going to raise a workforce. And with it, let's not forget, will come mites. This is the time usually if the colony is in its second year, it's going to prepare to raise a swarm. With warmer springs, late winter, early spring, and moving forward, if it gets warm, foraging is also going to be in its earnest. So this is the time to bolster these hives that are coming out of winter, and to stimulate them, we generally feed them 1-to-1 sugar syrup, which means 1 part sugar to 1 part water. This is the time when the food reserves in the hive are at its lowest because the colony has successfully overwintered and most likely have consumed, if not all, most of the food reserves within the hive. Once more, depending on your region and your location, the time that they're most likely going to starve would be February and March. If you have warmer winters, they are probably going to start consuming more and more. So by the time it's March, you're going to be looking at an almost empty hive in terms of food resources. If you choose to feed that colony, though, you must continuously feed it because that colony is going to now rapidly expand, relying on your supplemental feeding. But if there is no nectar in the landscape or it gets suddenly cold, the food reserves dwindle, that colony will crash. So which is why feeding continuously till you know that the nectar flow has started in the landscape is extremely important. Uninterrupted food supply will keep that colony strong. In summer, obviously, it's honey season. So the bees are also in winter storage mode. And if you have honey supers on, this would also be the time to think about when is the best week to actually take those honey supers off so that the bees can continue to store all of that remaining honey in their colonies and sort of to make up for their winter feed. And of course, let's not forget, water is critically important. When we are transitioning from summer to fall, honey supers, once more, I'm giving a very general guideline, should be off by the end of July. It could also be August, depending on where you're located, because this will then allow the bees to fill up the brood boxes with enough honey. And very importantly, it leaves time for a seasonally effective mite treatment. This is also the time when the colony is preparing fat fall bees. And I'll talk more about the fall winter bees towards the third half of this presentation. These bees, as we know, are able to survive for about at least 5 to 6 months in the colony. So the colony should have adequate food reserves, not only stored within the hive, but also within the honeybee tissues, within the tissues of these overwintering bees. These bees that are emerging late summer, early fall, these are called diutinous bees or overwintering bees. So proteins must be stored in cells, and the bees are now starting to cluster for warmth. In fall, it is obviously the time when we have to build up hives that lack adequate honey reserves. Usually, we feed a 2-to-1 ratio of sugar syrup, so 2 parts sugar to 1 part water. This helps bees store that in the colonies. We are also obviously using an in-hive feeder. We have to watch out for first frost, and we stop feeding liquid sugar syrup as soon as that happens. If additional sugar is necessary, we opt for granulated sugar, fondant, candy boards, whatever is our regular practice. So during this time, the bees are generating warmth. They may be raising some young. They are using honey for food, and they are clustering in the hive. Our lab, this is the fourth year that we are doing it. We are part of a large national brood monitoring effort during the winter months as a part of this project that Auburn University leads. And this is the first year that we are doing it from Washington State, like being in a cold climate. We've done it for 3 years in the past when we were in Mississippi. It is surprising when you look at how colonies raise brood depending on where they are located. We might even get brood breaks earlier in the season, depending on where we are. And if it gets warmer, you never know, we might start seeing some more brood. But this is the time when you can assume that if the resources are just right, the colony is probably still raising some young bees. But they are definitely going to start clustering in the hive and using honey for food. So adequate population of healthy fat bees, the diutinous honeybees, are extremely important to be present in that colony. They need to be healthy. They need to have enough nutritional reserves to be able to make it through the winter months. So enough stored honey. Don't forget ventilation. Cold bees are bad. Cold and wet bees, even more miserable. And then, of course, if there are warmer winters, we need to be mindful and keep watching for the food resources in the hive. The bees might eat more, so we need to be able to replenish as needed. If it is warmer winters, and obviously there is no risk of an immediate frost, we can resort to that fall formula for liquid sugar syrup feeding. But we must remember that our main goal always should be to leave ample honey in the hive for overwintering. In case we have to provide emergency dry form of sugar feeding, that winter cluster has to spare foragers to go out to look for moisture. It could be condensation from within that hive, but they still have to spare foragers to go find that water to be able to liquefy that dry form of sugar. So in other words, a weak colony will anyhow suffer. So our main goal should always be to leave ample honey in the hive for winter. Now, if you have read my supplemental feeding guide, you'll see that I have given some ballpark amount. How much honey is actually enough in your region? For the south, for the mid section of the US, for the northern region of the US, and then moving into Canada. Those are really ballpark amounts. How much is enough in your region? I would always ask an experienced local beekeeper. Because it varies year to year. It varies on the size of your colony. It varies on how much your colony has been able to store. So really, how much is enough? It depends on your location, on that particular season, on the hive itself. But I would often say that you rather have excess than not enough so that we do not have to go in and provide supplemental feeding. From a larval perspective, this picture to your left is what we should be aiming for. You can look at these healthy larvae floating in these luscious puddles of this brood food. You can see it right here. To your right, this image right here shows you what starved dry larva looks like. So this is what we are truly trying to avoid. And from a colony perspective, if you see something like this, where every last bee is head down in the cell looking for that last drop of honey, or it's a small winter cluster, and then all of the honey is gone in the hive, these are most likely signs of starvation in that colony. This is what we are trying to avoid at the end of the overwintering period. So with that, when is it really crucial for winter bee management? Every single day of the year. That colony has to be super healthy, has to be well fed, and has to be managed for mites every day of the year so that when it's time to create the fall bees, that hive is ready. The diutinous bees are produced sometime in late summer to early fall. So what you're looking at is a cross section of honeybee abdomens. This white cloudy mass that you see are fat bodies. Fat bodies are dense, nutrient rich. They store energy, they store resources. They're also sites for important protein productions that bees need for metabolism, for fats, for vitellogen, and other important proteins. So when you're looking at a forager, look how lean she is. Because all she does is she expends all of that energy. She goes out to the landscape. She's collecting all the resources. She's bringing it back to the hive. On the other hand, the nurse bees are fat, full of fat. They are going to store all of that nutrient resources and continue feeding the colony. The diutinous bees, even if they don't look like your nurse bees, they should have at least a ton of fat reserves. If nothing else, they should be between the forager and the nurse bee in this picture. If you are attending American Beekeeping Federation, the ABF meeting in Mobile, Alabama, in January of 26, I am actually hosting a little workshop there for teaching beekeepers how to dissect bee abdomens to look for these fat bodies, but also how to mash it up and look for nosema in their bees. So it's basically diagnosing the honeybee abdomens, looking for nosema as well as looking for fat bodies. So that would be a hands-on workshop that I'm offering. And if you haven't signed up for it yet, please don't hesitate to reach out to Debbie or ABF in general, and then please sign up for that workshop. But we are basically going to look at these fat bodies within the nurse bees. So even if your diutinous bees don't look as fatty as the nurse bees, at least they should not look as lean as forager bees. That will really tell you that they have a lot of fat bodies in their abdomens to be able to store all of those fats, those proteins, those nutrients within their body tissues to last the overwintering months. So summer bees, they only live for a few weeks. Their main job is to, whereas for diutinous bees, their main job is to keep the colony warm. They form a heat-generating cluster, they are feeding on stored honey, and they care for the queen until spring. Diutinous bees actually live much longer than summer bees. The winter bees are a special generation of these long-lived honeybees. They are born late summer and early fall. They have fatter bodies. They have a completely different physiology because they have high vitellogen in content. They have low juvenile hormone, and this allows them to survive for longer months. Vitellogenin is an important nutritional and immunity protein. Juvenile hormone keeps them, low juvenile hormone keeps them at their stage rather than aging, progressing faster. So this really helps them survive much longer during the winter months. Winter bees, however, do not hibernate. If you think that your colony is actually hibernating, that is not entirely true. Yes, the colony has slowed down because now you have colder days. You have fewer daylight hours. The queen probably has completely stopped laying if you're in a very cold region. But the workers in general, they are not completely hibernating. They stay minimally active because they need to generate heat without overspending their food reserves. So they are staying as active as they need to be, but they are using a lot of that energy for generating heat within that overwintering cluster. So they're utilizing all of those stored resources within their body tissues and within the colony. So the key characteristics of these diutinous honeybees could be looked at 4 different levels. The first is their physiology. These diutinous bees, they develop larger fat bodies. As I mentioned, they have high levels of vitellogenin. It's a protein that boosts immunity and provides energy. It's also a very important nutritional marker protein in bees. These bees, they also have low juvenile hormone. So this helps delay foraging, keeps them younger longer. Then when you're looking at the longevity, these can live for up to or more than 6 months compared to the summer honeybees that only live for about 4 to 6 weeks. When you're looking at thermoregulation, these form a tight cluster. So they are vibrating their flight muscles to generate heat, thereby keeping themselves, the queen, and if they have small brood, then they're keeping that brood warm. So don't think that these bees are hibernating, which is why having enough food reserves within the colony is so important. And when you're looking at their roles, They are essential for colony survival, ensuring that the queen and the colony can make it successfully live through the winter until new bees can be raised in the following spring. During slightly warmer days, and I don't mean like you're having a fake spring or anything, if the temperatures rise bare enough for these bees to be able to fly out, they might take cleansing flights on warmer days where they're primarily focused on waste removal rather than foraging. So that might happen with these diutinous bees. But if you see that, it necessarily does not mean that they are actually out there foraging. So if you're comparing these winter bees with the summer bees, that comparison is pretty obvious. Winter bees have plump, larger fat bodies. They are built for endurance. They need to last longer. Their vitellogenin, their physiology, their juvenile hormones are very different. Summer bees are less fat, they're less plump. They are doing intense hive work and they are focusing on immediate colony needs. Feeding, guarding, foraging, they're focusing on immediate colony needs. The winter bees can easily survive 4 to 6 months, whereas summer bees only live up to about 6 weeks. The winter bees are clustering for heat generation. They are protecting the overwintering queen, and they are assisting with spring brood production and colony overwintering. Whereas the summer bees, they are foraging, they are nursing, they are comb building. They are rearing the brood, they are guarding, they are doing all of the other functions that are necessary for an active honeybee colony as such. The larval stage of the winter bees, they are fed obviously a different quality food in late summer, early fall. Whereas the summer bee larvae that become the regular workers in summer, they are fed a different quality food in spring and summer. High protein in diutinous bee larvae compared to summer bees, which get both proteins and fats. And even when you're looking at their metabolic profiles, their physiology, their metabolic profiles help with antioxidants and energy stores rather than summer bees, because the summer bees are spending a lot more energy than they store. Winter bees are saving a lot more energy than they spend. So that contrast is very clear. So proper nutrition throughout the year, especially during that critical transition phase from summer to fall, ensuring healthy, large, fat winter bee production is extremely important. The colony should have enough food stores as well. So not just the bees having enough food stores within their body, but also the colony within its hive. Then mite management is very critical during peak summer because we want these bees to have less viral diseases. We want these bees to have better immunity with better diets. So just like feeding, nutrition, mite management is equally important. And don't forget to check the colonies with warmer winters and increased activities, because you never know that these diutinous bees might just be going through that food resource pretty fast. So in summary, to ensure winter bee survival, we must be able to provide ample food. We should control for varroa mites. Don't forget ventilation to prevent moisture. And then obviously insulating hives for warmth, reducing the entrance sizes to block drafts and pests, protecting against wind, avoiding disruptive winter inspections to keep the colony healthy and warm, conserving the colony's energy will keep the winter bee strong and as warm as possible. So food, mite management, and overall the hive management for keeping it warm. These three are very important criteria to make sure that the winter bees that are present in the colony with the queen and maybe some brood make it through the winter months. So I wanted to end by showing you 3 different papers for reference. And these should all be open access, but if you cannot access any of these papers, just let me know. I'll be happy to download the PDF and send it to you. So this first paper that I wanted to show you is called Learning at Old Age, a study on winter bees. This study basically is looking at winter bee memory and learning behavior, but the main take-home message that you should take from this paper is actually reading the introduction, which talks about winter bee physiology. So if you want to know more about what these winter bees are like, That paper gives a brief summary at the very beginning. The rest of the paper talks about whether winter bees can learn and remember as well as the summer foragers, which obviously not because they're primarily within the hive. They really don't go out much. But if you want to know more about winter bee physiology, this could be a good introductory paper. The second paper that I wanted to talk to you about was one of actually our papers from 21. This talks about the impacts of overwintering conditions on the physiology of the diutinous honeybees. So in this paper, there were some bees that overwintered outdoors across Oregon, California, Washington versus some bees that overwintered indoors. So what we found, the take-home message that I left here for you, is that important physiological markers such as head proteins, abdominal fat contents were higher in honeybees that overwintered in controlled indoor storage facilities compared with bees that were held outdoors through the winter months. And quite obvious, when they're being stored outdoors, the variations in the elements could be a lot. So the bees could be consuming a lot more. They could be using a lot of energy to stay warmer a lot more than controlled same temp indoor storage facilities. But this was like one of the interesting things that we found when it came to overwintering bee physiology. And then the third paper that I wanted to show you is basically an overview of colony management. I don't know if any of you participated in the US Beekeeper survey that Project APSM and ABF ran, where we had asked questions and about 850, roughly a few plus minus beekeepers responded to that survey and how many colonies they lost between June of 24 through March of 25. And then there are several other questions that we asked in that survey. But what we found was that feeding, supplemental feeding, the timing and the frequency, we found some effect on the net losses. Amitraz that we know when we talk about mites. So when we ask the beekeepers, why do you think you might have lost your colony? The majority, as always, answered mites because they thought it could have been amitraz resistance, it could have been varroa mites, it could have been so many different things. But what we actually found interesting is that using amitraz, not using amitraz, did not have an effect on those net reported losses. So as I keep saying, it's a lot more complicated than just mites. It's a combination of many different factors, and it should start with nutrition. So the last thing that I wanted to talk to you about, and thank you, Yasmin, for giving me an opportunity to share this. We are hosting the first ever Honeybee International meeting. It's a very specific meeting focused on honeybee researchers next year in June 6th through 12th at the WSU campus in Pullman, Washington. The theme of the conference is Nutrition, Landscape Change, and Honeybee Health, but it's a multi-day conference where we are hoping researchers, beekeepers, industry personnel, veterinarians, and anyone who's interested to learn more about honeybee research will join us across the US, Canada, and Europe. It's a hybrid meeting. We would love to see you in person, but if you want, you can also join us online. This QR code will take you to that meeting registration link. I can also share more resources with you if you reach out to me. I also shared that with Yasmin. If you want to, if possible, Yasmin, if you could share it also with the other club members. So we have different sessions dedicated for pesticides in bees, nutrition and bees, diseases and bees, mites and bees. We are also hoping to have large national and international panels on tropilelaps, on what would the Canadian Honey Council do, or suppose say how would ABF or AHPA tackle the different bee problems, one on pesticides and bees, one on queen breeding aspects in bees. We also have a ton of hands-on workshop that we are offering on instrumental insemination, hive inspections for veterinarians. We also have tours of the WSU bee facilities, of the WSU vet school to engage more with the veterinarians. We also have tours of commercial grower operations and commercial beekeeper operations. All of that is present in that agenda that's uploaded on our website. We would love for you to come join us. We would love for you to spread the word. This is the first time ever we are doing it in North America, and this will really depend if they ever come back to North America or not. So I'm really hoping that we can make this meeting a success. Please come join us in June. whether in person or virtually. We would love to see you in person. Thank you so much for inviting me again to talk about winter bees this time. I have listed my email address. I'm also happy to take any questions. There might be some in the chat box. Let me know if you would like me to read out the questions, or how would you like me to deal with the questions?
Well, so much for that, and we do have some questions here. So we'll start out with John, who asks, when feeding in late February and March, if you had a two deep hive full, how do I balance feeding and swarming, assuming more food allows them to multiply more? So this is going from winter into spring. How do I balance feeding and swarming?
This is a great time when people actually make splits to prevent swarming. So if you're thinking about, say, for example, commercial beekeeper operation, when bees come back from California, they are very strong. This is the time when people make splits. If
Mhm.
you're feeding them and you're stimulating them and you think your colony, you have a two-box colony, it's getting pretty strong. At that point when you might need to do swarm control, why not split it and have another additional hive?
Okay, so Montgomery County Beekeepers Association, I think this is Regina.
Yes, yes.
Hi,
Sorry.
Regina.
I tried to switch my removal
Oh,
role, but
not
it
at
didn't
all.
work.
So Regina is asking, some people state that you shouldn't leave fall honey in the colony due to high ash content, but instead backfill with 2-to-1 sugar syrup. Have you done any work on this?
I
So,
have not done work on this because this is on my to-do list for next year. This year, I'm actually collecting winter bees across the US. And I'm also collecting winter mites across the US. And I'm trying to look at their physiology and see what might change, nutrition perspective wise, if we have a different way to manage these mites, but also look at the overwintering bee physiology. I have heard a few people talk about this, because obviously spring nectar and fall nectar are very different. So that really depends on how honey might be different. But if you think about nature, that's what landscape has.
mhm, mhm,
And that's what bees are meant to collect.
mhm,
If they are collecting, I would not probably change it and
mhm,
backflow it with 2-to-1 sugar syrup. I only go and feed my colonies if they feel light in like end of summer, beginning of fall. If they are feeling light compared to the rest of the hives, I'll go in and I'll basically pump them with 2-to-1 sugar syrup. But if they have collected something naturally from the landscape, I'll let it be.
mhm. So you always prefer the honey, even the fall
Yes.
honey, to the 2-to-1. Okay. She also asks, does the queen physiology change in the winter?
Yes, the queen physiology does change, and we are also starting to kind of slowly dig into that as well. There's only one queen in a colony, so we are kind of going slow how many we can work with. But yes, because the queen stops laying, so even sometimes nutritional strategies help us conserve all of that fat and the nutritional reserve and the energy within the queen. So if you're just feeding supplemental proteins in fall, you're really not providing a pollen-based supplemental diet. It will help the queen kind of stay in that reduced egg laying stage. So it's conserving her energy, it's conserving all of the fats and the proteins within her body. Once more, the colony does not hibernate, but it basically kind of switches down to the minimal activity that is required. So a queen's energy expenditure is far less in winter if she's not laying eggs.
Mhm. Okay. John has a comment here. There are additives that you can add to one sugar. I use Honeybee Healthy and Amino Bee Booster. Some people say it doesn't help and that Super DFM is better. Do you have general suggestions on additives? I think this is you can point him to the Honeybee Health Coalition Honeybee Nutrition Guide,
You
but
are going to get me into trouble. Nobody likes when I answer these questions. But back to what Yasmin said, if you look at the Honeybee Health Supplemental Feeding Guide, I did touch upon adding additives and probiotics. Now, obviously, quick note, this is what we knew until the end of 2023, because this was published in 2024. There has not been extensive research done, which is also another thing that I'm currently looking into, especially with commercial probiotics, whatever work we've done. And this is obviously, this involves Oregon State, Ramesh Sagili as well. We really did not see any positive effect from the probiotics.
Hmm.
Randy Oliver, Kirk Anderson, they published a paper soon after we wrote this honeybee feeding guide. They also did not find any positive effects as such from the probiotics. In terms of these additives, not much is really known, not enough research is done, and it's very mixed review. But if you do go back into that supplemental feeding guide, not only these additives, but also when you're comparing these different supplemental diets, you'll see that I have summarized the effects in a chart at the very end of that feeding guide,
Right.
whether they have positive effects, neutral effects, or negative effects. But once more, take it with a grain of salt. It's until the end of 23, which is why I'm hoping that every 2 to 3 years I can continuously update it as and when we.
Sorry if I got you in trouble with the question. That was not my intention.
I do get into a bit of trouble depending on, like who's listening. I'm like, don't make me say the bad stuff. But no, this is an absolutely valid question.
And where do we get the guide? It was the one you showed in the beginning. There'll be
It is freely available, and I'm going to type that in while I answer questions. I'll pull it up and I'll type that in.
Thank you.
Sure. Donna is asking, have there been any studies done comparing heavily insulated hives to hives kept indoors to see if the bees in insulated hives maintain higher fat bodies as the indoor bees do?
That is a fantastic question. No. So Brandon Hopkins at Washington State University, he does some work with overwintering storage, and that is my to-do list for next year to apply for a funding where I'm really interested in understanding not only the physiology of the colony, but also these different overwintering conditions, as you said, heavily insulated versus sparsely insulated across a longitudinal gradient, the mites and the bees, and what's happening. Because a lot of people also say, if you insulate it better, or if you keep it in controlled CO2 and environmental temperatures, it might help with controlling mites. Does it really? We don't know.
Okay. John also says it's great that you have the data on Amitraz and that it had no effect on overwinter losses. Now, I don't know whether that's the case. Is there other data on OAV or HopGuard since Amitraz might not be the strongest treatment, but better for keeping counts low? Is that that wasn't my okay, go ahead. Sorry. Go ahead.
No, sorry. What were you saying?
Well, he's saying, okay, so I'm just going to read this again. It's great that you have the data on Amitraz and that it had no effect on overwinter losses. Is that what the data actually shows?
Yes, so
Okay.
that graph, and I can pull it up while we talk right here. Give me 1 second, let me pull it up. So what that survey actually showed, beekeepers who used Amitraz versus beekeepers who did not use Amitraz, there was no significant effect on overwintering losses. So is Amitraz resistance a problem? Probably not. And I'm pulling that graph up for you right now.
And he continues, is there other data on OAV or HopGuard since Amitraz might not be the strongest treatment, but better for keeping counts low? Keeping low counts low.
There are a couple of studies and there are some information available, but let me pull this up and you'll have a better idea of what people have said they have used. Here. If you can see this.
Yeah.
So Amitraz only, product unknown, Amitraz plus something else, non-Amitraz, known product, and none. And if you go into the survey itself and the metadata, we have all of the products listed here. I think when it comes to surveys and what people use, this is one of the most comprehensive results that you can find.
Okay. So I'm going to actually piggyback on Donna's question about wrapping the hives. I just wanted to ask, do you wrap your hives and
No.
just like a product? No, okay. Because I guess my next question was, I mean, is there any data on whether wrapped hives use less honey resources or the same?
I am not aware of any data or any work that has been done about honey consumption, wrapped versus unwrapped hives. But I think it's absolutely doable. When we do that overwintering storage study eventually next year, hopefully, I think this is definitely something we can add in. The more the wrapping, the better the insulation, assuming you're also having enough ventilation. I have seen, the part you go to, there are obviously people who are doing it more and more because it gets colder. Where we are located right now in Pullman, we do not wrap our hives, but we also put a ton of our colonies in indoor storage.
Oh, okay. Okay. Do you use, what about entrances? Do you use about just one entrance or do you use top
Just
entrances?
one entrance.
Just one entrance at the
Just one entrance and an entrance reducer.
Okay, okay. Um, the question of just winter bees, just in general, like you talked about, so the winter bees that are emerging in this in the winter bees are formed the summer fall. Are they sort of do they come sort of pre-programmed to be winter bees, or is there something about the external factors about the environment that it's getting colder, less pollen is coming in, what that makes them become winter bees? Do you
You
know?
are absolutely right. The environment shapes winter bees. Honeybee colonies, there is still so much we don't know. There are so many cues that go in. The days are getting shorter. The pollen that's coming in, the nectar that's coming in, the quantity and the quality is obviously changing. The days are getting colder. The queen starts to reduce the egg laying. It's as if like the whole hive mind knows that it's time for producing winter bees. And physiologically, their metabolism, their proteins, their energy consumption is so different during the winter months.
But it is those external factors that push them into
Yes,
the
yes,
colony into producing these winter bees, though.
correct.
They're not sort of pre-programmed. There's nothing genetically sort of not genetically, but like they're not sort of they don't come preloaded to be winter bees or anything like that. It's
No, no, they are raised at a time when they're meant to be winter bees. So it's sort of like epigenetics. It's the environment that's shaping their physiology.
uh-huh.
Going back to like preloaded with a genetic makeup,
Mhm.
there was a study done by Robinson and Page way back, and I can share that information. I think it was 1989, maybe. I don't remember. But they had done a super cool study where they actually found there was a genetic basis, probably, for foraging. There could be some bees that were meant to be pollen foragers versus some that were nectar foragers
Mhm. Mhm.
versus some that could be like mixed foragers. So there's obviously like a genetic basis of predetermination of what type of forager they might be. But as much as we know about winter bees, there is so much we still don't know.
So that the question of foraging then, if you see bees flying in the winter, are these bees then they're not forage if they're foraging, they're not foraging. They're just either out to eliminate or they're looking for water, but they're not forager bees at all. Is that do they
It completely depends uh, on that situation itself. So if it is slightly warmer, you don't see them bringing in any pollen or anything. You know there's nothing growing in the landscape. You might even see bee fecal matter close to the hive, or they could be like physically throwing stuff out of the colony, trying to clean and eliminate waste. When you see more and more activity continuously at the colony entrance, and you feel like you know for sure it's not frosty, it's a pretty warm winter day. Like today, we had 50, 55. If you see them actively flying at the colony entrance, they might be actively foraging or they're looking for something. Or
they're
it just
looking for
might be
something?
warm enough for them to like break that winter cluster, come to the colony entrance and see what's happening.
Mhm.
One thing I do want to say though, in terms of like going back to your previous question about winter bees having a different genetic makeup or not, or if it's the climate, that's the environmental conditions that's making them in terms of their physiology, one of my studies, we're writing that paper up now, we also saw a massive shift in their gut microbiome in the colony.
Mhm.
So we had bees that were placed across 4 locations in Mississippi along an ag intensification gradient. Obviously, the forage and everything else is so different, right? Across these 4 locations. No matter what their gut microbiome was like during the rest of the year, once they went through that overwintering phase, they were all very similar. And then they started changing again.
Hmm.
So, even in terms of these overwintering bees, not only their physiology, but their gut microbiome composition could also be quite different.
I see. Okay. Okay. I'm looking back in the questions. Carissa's asking me, what do you mean wrapped, Yasmin? Insulated or with tar paper? Of course, I mean insulated
You
with
made me sound like I had an
insulation tar
attitude with that
paper. I
question.
think Carissa is kind
My
of my
association with
nerves.
wrapping is not insulation. That's why I asked. Like I know people who wrap, but it's not insulation. So
Well,
that's
I think
why I was
I
asking for
think I meant
clarification.
with insulation, Carissa. Anyway,
Okay, okay.
uh, summer bees produced in Regina saying bees produced in dearth can also be diutinous bees. Okay, yeah, and this sort of gets to my question of like what how are they responding to the environment, or is there a is there an internal thing? Is that true? Summer bees produced in dearth can also be diutinous bees. Is
I
that?
have not heard of that. I might need to do a bit more studying, but the genetic code of the bees is pretty similar throughout the year. It's the shorter days, a different diet source, colder temperatures that really trigger those genes to start producing proteins that tell the body to be longer lived, not a short-lived summer worker.
Regina, do you want to come off mute and talk about where you?
Yeah, but, I mean, mostly it's because I mean, generally winter bees are produced because there's a lack of pollen. When the
Right, right.
pollen stops, the same thing can happen in the summertime when there's no pollen coming in. Those bees don't really have nurses, don't have
Right.
they have very little nursing to do, so they can become longer lived, not necessarily
Yes,
a winter bee. They can
yes.
also what they call diurnus, which are longer live, which diurnus just means longer lived bees. So they don't become foragers as quick. So
Mhm.
Yes, you're absolutely right.
Mhm.
That could also possibly be. But I was just saying that I have not done this study, but I'm also not aware. I might need more reading to do to see if summer bees that were exposed to pollen dearth, if they could actually survive through the entirety of the winter month or not. There was
Mhm.
one thing where we did for a different project where we were paint marking bees and releasing them, but we started doing it from end of August, beginning of September. And we were trying to go back and count and see how many different colors we were finding the following winter and spring,
Oh,
trying to
wow.
see which week would actually mark more of the diutinous bees. But
Oh.
yes, Regina, you're absolutely right. This could trigger the diutinous effect in those bees.
Mhm. Okay, wonderful. Does anybody else have any other questions here? We're coming up on 8 o'clock. Donna Dushang, I think you had a video of is this right that you put an otoscope, I think, an endoscope in one.
An endoscope
Yeah.
into a hive. I'm working with some of the folks that I did the master beekeeping class with through Cornell to just kind of go into our winter colonies and see what the cluster is doing. And these endoscopes are really pretty inexpensive on Amazon these days. They have great video if once you learn how to use them, and they work right with your iPhone. And part of that has been my project at the end of my beekeeping class was working on how insulation affects winter hives. And then I came across some studies by a UK researcher named Derek Mitchell, who was talking about, in his engineering mind, that bees in a tree with thick insulation don't cluster the way that bees in thin hives do. And that actually clustering that so tightly that they can't move to food stores is really a sign of distress um, as opposed to, a natural thing. So anyway, we just started talking. A few of us decided to get these endoscopes and look at them. Let's see, let's see, share if I can get to. That's not letting me do that. Hold
Oh,
on.
no.
Let's see.
No, I think I just changed the settings for you to be able to share.
Okay, hang on then.
That is super
Okay.
cool.
I don't
We
know what I'm
played
doing
around with
actually.
some cameras for heat sensors of the brood clusters to see, or even just, sorry, the winter clusters to see what's happening.
Yeah, what we were just wanting to
That
see
was
was
nice.
because there's so many of us that are
Mhm.
Yep.
it just we some of us have insulated hives. I do. My hives are all horizontal, And so you can see up on the upper corner here, that's the bottom of the frame because I've gone into the bottom and I'm looking up. This was a day that was 28 degrees and the bees are obviously eating. They're not clustering tightly. My hives are built out of 2 by materials, so 2 by 10, 2 by 8s, 2 by 4s. So it's a thick wood, and that I don't have to leave huge amounts of honey for them because they're so insulated. Um, but anyway, that was, just we're going to try to do it once a month through the winter, just see what the bees are doing and how far up they're moving. They obviously weren't up very high on these are deep frames, and they weren't up very high on that. So, and hopefully I'll get better at using the camera.
So this was in a deep box, and the cluster is still, is it a deep and a medium? In
No,
the
Horizontal.
I'm exclusively horizontal hive,
horizontal
so
box,
it's
sorry.
one
Okay.
deep.
Huh. Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So Priya, just looking at the activity, like, is that, are you like looking at the amount of activity that those bees are, does that look like what you would expect, or?
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. They're hungry, they're feeding.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
And we all love sugar.
That's right.
That
Oh, that's so
sure.
neat.
is
So
really cool.
anyway, it's kind of
This
fun.
is super cool. This is super cool. I
That
think
is
I'm gonna buy an endoscope. I've only been playing around with those heat cameras.
the FLIR
Yeah,
cameras, right? Yeah. And now,
right.
Donna, is this
And
a
the fleers don't do a great job on the insulated hives. I mean, you don't
right?
get through as much. This is a camera that, I mean, it's on probably a 12-foot cable that hooks to your iPhone, and the camera is like the size of a Q-tip maybe. And there's a camera lens on the end of it and then on the side, and I can toggle back and forth. And then I can also change the intensity of the light. And like I said, it was under $30.
Oh,
And
wow.
so something fun to just kind of, I mean, what else are you going to do in the middle of winter?
Oh, that's so.
So
Is it
anyway,
is it an endoscope or an otoscope? Is it or
endoscope.
endoscope?
Yeah.
Okay.
And
Okay.
I think the ones that, we're using, a lot of people use them for checking water lines or sewer lines or, some kind of tubing or whatever. So it's pretty heavy duty, but
Yeah.
we started the project in November. But we were still so warm here in Maryland. It was, almost 60 degrees. And putting that endoscope into a hive when the bees were flying was not a great idea.
Mhm.
They did not like it.
Oh,
So I didn't get a lot of recording done then because they just attacked the camera. This, I guess they were a little, more in torpor, maybe just so busy eating that
That they didn't notice. Yeah.
yeah, that they didn't really pay attention to it.
Oh,
So,
that's so cool. That's
just
great.
something to do.
you should see our pictures of the overwintering brood monitoring. It is ridiculous. We are in the middle of snow, and then we've opened up colonies, and we have a diesel powered heater so that we can actually blast hot air at the bees in the middle of snow when we are evaluating them. It is like the worst time ever to open a colony, but we also have to do it to be able to know for sure what's happening with the brood. And we need to look at capped brood
Uh,
in those
yeah.
colonies. And I hate doing it. The things we do for science.
The things
Right.
to do besides, right? John, did you want to talk? Yeah, I see that you put some links in here. Do you want to come off mute and just talk about the
Sure. Hi, everybody. Yeah, on Wednesday, Vito Pharma asked me to do a presentation on developing a sustainable mite management plan and reducing colony losses in the winter. So a lot of what Priya is talking about, I'll be building on, if I could put it that way, reinforcing what she said and maybe some additional information, much more focused on getting the colony ready for the winter with a focus on mite management. Priya mentioned it as well, but the focus of this presentation really is mite management. And like Priya said, it really is all year long getting the colony ready in reference to mites as well. So, and I did some amitraz resistance testing on my colonies here in New Jersey. I think I tested 30 some colonies, and I'll share those results. Spoiler alert, I got really good results. I don't, fortunately, I don't have much amitraz resistance in my colonies, but I'll share what I did and what I found with that.
That's great. So that's this Wednesday. I say you put the link in the
Yeah, and link, I think that'll work. I'm not sure about that. The Vito Pharma set it up. I think that's a good link. If somebody wants to click on it and just at least let me know.
I clicked on it. It works. Yeah.
Okay. And
Yeah.
just it's at 12 noon East Coast time. Vito Pharma's in Europe, so they have no idea what time zones we're in.
And I see John just has one more question. I see some people in extreme north control heat in the hive with some heaters. Why is this not a more common approach? This is, I guess, you're opening up colonies and not necessarily controlling, but exposing them to heat. I have just started in the last 5 years and still learning, right? So controlling heat in the hive with heaters, actual, I guess, electric heaters, John, is that what you mean? Or
I saw a few posts on people extremely north in Michigan that were using, and they control so the heat going in is just a supplement, right? So that it's not making it hot in there, it's just offsetting it. So you can use 2-inch wood, or 2-inch foam, by the way, is more effective than 2-inch wood. So if you wrap your hive in there, but I'm worried about condensation. I don't know because I did the top and the sides, but I'm not sure where what that's going to do to the water. So
Hmm.
we'll see.
Hmm.
I was thinking of leaving one side off so it would be cold and condense the water, but maybe I'm overthinking it.
Mhm. Mhm.
So to maybe help answer that question, there was some research of many years ago where they basically put the heater under the hive, the equivalent of maybe a 40-watt bulb, incandescent bulb, not LED, but incandescent bulb. And they really didn't find that that improved the overwintering of the colony. And I've seen that repeated a few times, but uh, supplementing heat in the colony didn't seem like it made a lot of difference.
Hmm.
Insulation does, and John and others. I did a little bit of a study a few years ago about insulating hives and a top vent or not top vent. Tom Seeley put me up to it. And so that was an article out in ABJ a few years ago. I don't know if I have a link handy. If I can find it before we finish, I'll put it in the chat.
Okay. Well, wonderful. I think we are just about, we're actually a little over. So John, if you wanted to send that link to Carissa, we can send out a number of links that we talked about today in a follow-up email. We could do that.
I'll do
Priya's got to
that.
go.
Yeah.
I
I'm
can
sorry,
see.
I need to go
You
pick
gotta
my
pick
kid
up
up
your
from
kid.
daycare.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Priya. Thank you, everybody, for joining us.
Thank you
It
so
was
much.
Thank
great.
This was
you.
such
Thank
Thank
a
you,
fun
you.
Priya.
All right.
Thank
conversation.
you.
Bye-bye.
Please, please join me and call us if you can.